All right, guys. Um, Welcome back to another Men Against Nonsense. Again, this is a movement. This is not entertainment. We're here to have these hard conversations about men and about our own actions and about being responsible for our own actions. And so it was suggested to me, and I'm not the kind of guy to converse about that which is trending, typically, because usually that which is trending is a distraction. But it was suggested to me to check out the Darrell Brooks closing arguments and comment on that. So we're gonna do that. I don't think I'm gonna do it all at once. It's 54 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. We'll see what light we can shed on this and how it pertains to us as men, men of conscience, men of morality, of integrity. We'll see how his behavior um, reflects on what we may want to be or may not want to be. Okay, let's get into that.
Go ahead.
I apologize. May I ask the court to consider perhaps an alternative, and I fully respect the ruling the court has just made, and I understand the basis for it. We all know the defendant, in his petulance, will say jury nullification in the first 3 seconds the jury's in the room.
Objection
The
to that.
proper
I don't
thing
think
to
that
do,
I
I
should be
think,
talked
Your
down
Honor.
Stop
to.
interrupting
I don't
Attorney
think
Opper,
I should be
please.
talked down to.
Allow him to make his closing
So
argument.
let me comment that I don't think she's talking down to him. I think she's pointing out something that most people don't even understand or recognize, that there's something called jury nullification, which the jury can find the defendant as not guilty because they don't agree with the law in question, right? And so us as men, right? This is not for women per se, but women who are listening to this. You have the right, if you don't agree with the law on the books, to say so and so is not guilty. This is not taught. There is no real training. No one goes through any real training as a juror, right? There's no real training for being a juror, yet you're compelled to participate, but they don't give you full training. And so this attorney, I believe, or maybe it's the DA, I guess. I haven't been following this case, just to be honest with you. Um, but this attorney is attacking his opportunity to be found not guilty via jury nullification, right? That's all she's addressing. That this woman here, I find that a little bit disturbing. Because from what I have heard about the case, it's pretty obvious that most people would probably say he was guilty. But just to kind of cover all bases, she is actually attacking jury nullification and not Darrell Brooks directly. But let me back that up a little bit, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But let's look at that again.
To that.
Proper
I don't
thing
think
to
that
do,
I
I
should be
think,
talked
Your
down
Honor.
Stop
to.
interrupting
I don't
Attorney
think I
Opper.
should.
Hold on. Then let's
Go
on
ahead.
with that.
I
There.
apologize. May I ask the court to consider perhaps an alternative, and I fully respect the ruling the court has just made, and I understand the basis for it. We all know the defendant, in his petulance, will say jury nullification in the first 3 seconds the jury's in the room.
Objection
The
to that.
So yeah, she's attacking jury nullification. She's not attacking him, and he doesn't seem wise enough to figure that out. Like, hey, um, she's not necessarily attacking you personally and your character. She's attacking your out, so to speak, his way out of um, facing the consequences of his actions.
proper
I don't
thing
think
to
that
do,
I
I
should be
think,
talked
Your
down
Honor.
Stop
to.
interrupting
I don't
Attorney
think I
Hocker,
should be
please.
talked down to.
Allow him to make his closing argument. I will object if he misstates the law. You can instruct the jury to disregard any misstatements of the law. And we continue in that fashion, if possible,
Right, but
for a reasonable
jury
amount of time.
nullification is not a misstatement of the law, and we as again, we as men, even women in this society, need to understand what really we are capable of, what rights we have, what rights are supposed to be protected, and the jury does have the right to say we don't agree with the law, so therefore we find this guy not guilty of a crime. It's just that simple. She doesn't want him to have an out, and I understand that it's her job to prosecute, I guess, the defendant. That's her job. So I get that, but it's dishonest as well, right? So that's. I just want to say that we have to be knowledgeable, especially if we want to participate in some of these systems. Now, you don't, even though you're compelled to do jury duty, there are ways, and I'm not advocating for this, but there are ways of representing yourself where they won't pick you for the jury anyway, right? But if you want to protect the system, you should participate as a juror to keep your eyes on not only the alleged criminal, but those who are supposed to be administering justice, because they're not all perfect. None of us are. So eyes should be on the criminals, and eyes should be on the prosecutors as well, and what crimes they may be committing, trying to get a conviction. But let's keep going.
And if it becomes to the point where there's no reasonable, legal, credible argument that's being made, then the court can decide as to whether or not he's forfeited his right to a closing argument. But we could at least try to, by merely objecting and the court telling the jury to disregard and instructing Mr. Brooks to move on to the next topic.
But how many prosecutors lie? And this is really, I really want to focus on Mr. Brooks, but how many prosecutors lie when they're trying to make their closing arguments? So if our argument is if he's lying while he's making his closing argument, he advocates the right to make a closing argument. Is that going to hold true for every prosecutor, every defendant, every defense attorney? In this case, he's defending himself, so he's acting as a defense attorney. Is that going to ring true? Or we're going to hold that standard to every last participant in a court trial? I mean, in any trial of any kind. If you're lying, you advocate your right for closing arguments. I mean, if that was going to be even across the board, it sounds like a good idea, but it's a slippery slope. Slippery slope. It depends on who's doing the deciding. Do you trust the judge or what?
Try to allow him his opportunity to provide a closing argument. If that's unworkable, then I think this record will be very clear as to the efforts of this court. And I think there is materials in the bench book, or I'm sorry, the jury instruction 705 that talk about a jury instruction. This court could even give, telling the jury that they are not at liberty to disregard the law, but we're not going that far yet because, frankly, you have told them and you will tell them that closing arguments are not evidence. And I think they will abide by that. So I know it's going to require.
So again, she's just trying to preempt his out. That's what I see. She's just trying to preempt his out. I don't want him talking about jury nullification, and rather than just being straight up with that, it's kind of this whimsical way, which attorneys do. This whimsical way of pointing out, oh, he's going to make this argument, and we don't want him to be able to make that argument because he may be able to be found not guilty. Again, She's doing her job. Do I like it? No. And this is really not about her, but I'm pointing this out because you, as a man against nonsense, should be able to spot nonsense as soon as you see it, as soon as you hear it, like, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense, which means you have to get informed about how these systems work in order to understand the nonsense when you see it, right? Because there's something called legalese. There's a certain way that these lawyers talk, and there are multiple definitions for certain words that you may not understand, but you're participating in the system, but you're ignorant. You know, in my early 20s, I try to start something called Anti-Ignorance Day, and I may bring that back, but we have to stop being ignorant if we're going to participate in certain things. But let me keep going. I'm dragging this out a little bit, and I don't want to do that.
Effort for the court to allow this to allow Mr. Brooks to try and proceed, but I think we should try that or something similar to that in an effort to get through this next step, or else we will continue at this pace forever.
I'm certainly willing to try that.
It's about all we could come up with, Your Honor.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to try it in this courtroom, and if he disregards that, to excuse the jury and then have him present from the other courtroom would be the second step, and then third would be a forfeiture.
Agreed.
Your Honor, I object to that.
Your objection is noted for the record. That will be the course of action that this court takes. The first time you violate the rule, you may be subject to forfeiting your right to be present, where you will give the closing argument from the other courtroom. And if you continue in a blatant disregard of the requirement that you not reference in any way jury nullification, I may make that final determination outside the presence.
Right. So
I object to that.
even there, notice that no one is saying that jury nullification isn't a thing. They just don't want him to refer to it. I mean, I could make an hour-long video just about the concept of jury nullification, and it's probably something people missed as they followed this trial. I didn't follow this trial. Again, this is like my first time watching anything pertaining to this trial, and I'm just disturbed by this conversation, and it's recorded on jury nullification. Like, most of us don't understand how critical jury nullification has been to the history of this country. Okay? And how people use jury nullification to rectify unjust laws. Yeah. Do some research on that, man. Do some research. Find out what's really going on around here. Okay? Let's keep going.
Your Honor.
All right, with that, let's bring the jury
For the
out.
record, may I respectfully request the legal reconsideration of your ruling? So is that a tacit agreement that you don't have to answer my objection, Your Honor?
I decline to reconsider.
I reject that ruling and take exception to that ruling, Your Honor.
Noted for the record.
For the record, may I request a legal or factual basis for your ruling, Your Honor?
Denied.
For the record, may I respectfully request a written judicial finding of facts and conclusion of law on this issue, Your Honor?
Denied.
For the record, may I respectfully move for interlocutory declaratory appeal on this matter?
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone.
Forgive the
And
ads,
I don't know.
guys. Forgive the ads.
I'm not the court to address that.
For the record, may I move to stay these proceedings until this instant matter is adjudicated by a court of competent jurisdiction, which this court has no subject matter jurisdiction.
Denied.
Under,
The jury's
based on
coming
what
in.
law or
All
fact?
rise for the jury, please.
Based on what law or fact? Because I'm going to inform the jury of their power. They deserve to know.
Now, I wonder if he he believes that they deserve to know, or it's just because it's in his best interest, right? So, um, I used to say a lot, information is power and privilege, right? And so what that means, or at least what it means for me, is that you, if you convey certain information to certain individuals, that's a privilege, right? Because you have this information that they don't have, and you're gifting it to them. But also, what you're doing is giving them power, because now with this newfound information, they can make different decisions and different actions. Um, with that being said, again, I can't see what's in his mind or in his heart, but does he really believe that they deserve to know about jury nullification? If he believed that, was he talking about jury nullification out in public spaces prior to his trial? Or is this just something he's passionate about now because it's an out for him, right? So always look at a man's integrity, right? Or look at this, look at the circumstances on which he's acting, the space in which he's acting, and ask yourself: is he just steadfast on this particular issue because it suits his interest at the moment, or is that something he's always been about? I would be curious to see if there was any. I think he has some kind of, he raps or something. Maybe I had to check out some of his music, see if he talked about jury nullification in the past. Then maybe I can see that this is not some kind of, leverage he's trying to gain for himself.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Go ahead, Mr. Brooks, your closing argument, please.
Good afternoon. It's been a long day. First off, I'd just like to start by letting you guys know that it's a lot of information that you guys should be privy to, I believe. And one thing that I believe that you have not been privy to is the truth of your rights and your duties, being the jury. The fact that you and you alone have the power, not well-prepared DAs with well-prepared and clearly rehearsed speeches and exhibits and a lot of theatrics. Frankly, not the judge. You and you alone have the power. You and you alone decide what is truth and what isn't truth. You should be informed that you have the power to nullify any law that you don't agree with.
Objection.
Oh, look at it.
Strike the statement.
Sustained.
Objection.
I will strike from the record the last statement made by the defendant.
that.
The jury
Which
will
is-
disregard it.
But what he's
Which
saying is true.
clearly what I've been saying. I believe that not only is it fair, but it's essential that you be privy to all knowledge, not knowledge that certain people feel that you should hear and shouldn't hear, disguised under the color of law. The fact of the matter is,
Again, sorry guys, I must have chose a terrible. I must have chose a terrible.
just like I did
version.
with
yeah, commercials.
my
Everywhere.
opening statements, I don't have a well-prepared or rehearsed speech. I didn't look in the mirror and say certain points to myself over and over again to make sure I have them right or anything like that. I've chosen to speak from the heart.
But I mean, maybe I missed
in my
something.
opening statements, and
But
now
in this
I'm going to speak.
in this closing statement, maybe he'll get to it. But this is the opportunity to prove why the law doesn't apply. In which case, or the law is unjust, which would justify the jury using nullification. And he spoke from the heart. That sounds good on the surface, on paper. Um, but really, a lot of times when you talk about speaking from the heart, it's more of an indicator of speaking from a position of emotional appeal rather than the facts. The facts. If you did nothing wrong, if you did nothing wrong, speaking from the heart wouldn't necessarily be the terminology that I would use. Maybe it's just me. I would just say, hey, I gave you guys all the facts. Here's what happened. I don't see how this law applies to me because my circumstances doesn't fit that, or that law doesn't fit this, or that this law is unjust, or what have you. But let me let him get into it.
From the heart. What you won't hear me do is argue facts.
Whoa. Whoa.
And the reason you won't hear me
Whoa.
argue facts
Yeah, let me hear that.
is because I believe that it takes away from what should be recognized. The tragedy.
Wait. It takes away. Let me go back here. And we ain't gonna argue the facts because
Thing like that, I've chosen to speak from the heart. In my opening statements, and now I'm going to speak from the heart. What you won't hear me do is argue facts.
gotta
And
say
the
that's a
reason you won't hear me
disturbing
argue
statement.
facts is because I believe that it takes away from what should be recognized. The tragedy of this event, it should be recognized. Trying to
And what's the tragedy?
argue facts.
I don't know, maybe it's just what's the tragedy? The tragedy is that 6 people were ran over and died. That's the tragedy, and that's also a part of the facts, right? The fact is you were behind the wheel, if I understand everything correctly, and 6 people died as a result. And you think talking about that fact takes away from the tragedy or identifies the tragedy? Whoa. Men, we gotta do better. We have to take responsibility for our actions. I was behind. If you were behind the wheel and this accident happened, you have to say, let's assuming that that's what he's trying to claim, that it was an accident or whatever. From things that I've heard, same thing with the other case, the guy who ran into the jogging sheriff deputies. I think he had fell asleep or something. I don't know, that was the claim or something I heard from some news station. If that's the case, then man up. But okay, let's talk about the facts. Were you or were you not behind the wheel? If the answer is yes, yes. Was the vehicle you were behind the wheel the vehicle that plowed into the people? Maybe plowed into the people is the wrong word, but why would not talking about the facts, or why would talking about the facts take away from the tragedy? The facts determine how the tragedy is. I don't know. I'm confusing myself now. Let me stop.
Facts of this, facts of that. I'm not going to waste your time doing that. It's a little emotional. I apologize for the long pause. It's hard to keep everything together emotionally. And honestly, I don't believe that I have any more tears left. It's been a hard year for the families, mostly, and that should not be lost on anyone. It shouldn't be taken away. I said it before and I'll say it again. It's a lot of people that are healing, that are attempting to heal. That opens the door to talk about forgiveness for a little bit. With every healing process, there comes a forgiving process.
Now, I'm in full agreement with forgiveness. Let me pause this for a second. I'm in full agreement with forgiveness. However, there are consequences to every action, right? And so the question is, can it be determined that you did this maliciously? If it can be determined that Mr. Brooks had done this maliciously, then there are consequences for the actions that he took on that day. Now, should the families forgive him? Should the communities that were impacted forgive him? Yeah, I think so, because it's better for them. Let me say something to you, man. Forgiveness is important. If you walk around bitter and angry about every little thing that someone has done to you, you will eventually explode with rage. And what will typically happen from that, you'll end up in prison or you'll be killed as a result. All right? So I'm pro forgiveness, just for self-preservation's sake. Like, people should forgive one another to keep from building up bitterness and hostility and malice and animosity that is self-destructive. What I'm against is people advocating forgiveness so that they don't have to suffer consequences of their actions. That's where you lose me when we talk about forgiveness. But hey, forgive, guys. Forgive, guys. It's good for you too. Forgiving someone else is good for you.
It's not an easy thing for anyone. What you've been hearing from the prosecution, and not to take anything away from them, but let's call it what it is. You've been hearing a lot of rerun. Same things over and over and over. No different than when you turn on the radio and you first hear that song that you don't like when you first hear it, but they play it so much that eventually you start saying it, the words to yourself before you even realize it. And then you sit and you go, I hate that song. Why am I singing it? That's what's been happening. Rerun. Over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Attempting to make things stick in your head that simply aren't true.
Now,
Why do I say what am I saying?
I thought he said he didn't want to argue the facts. So why say that what they said wasn't true if you don't want to argue the facts? So see, this is just kind of like, it's kind of like double speak. I don't want to argue the facts, but let me talk about how what they're saying isn't facts. aren't facts. The things that they're saying aren't facts, but I don't want to argue the facts. Right? So men, be careful. You say you don't want to talk about something, stick by it. I don't want to talk about that. Right? But I've been doing this for 30 minutes, so I'll do another part. Listen, I'll say this. You know, I don't like prison. I don't think anybody should have to go through that. I don't think the taxpayers should have to subsidize that. It's a whole lot about the prison system I just don't like. That's a video for another time. But this man clearly doesn't look like he wants to take responsibility for his own actions. And that's the sad thing. And that's the thing, men, we have to change about ourselves if we're going to be men against nonsense. If you've made a mistake, be man enough to say, hey, I screwed up. I did it. Okay? And be man enough to take whatever consequence comes with the mistake. Okay? And notice I'm saying mistake, not accident. Because an accident is different. A mistake and an accident are different. An accident means you didn't intend to do it. Okay? A mistake means you were mistaken about why that was a good idea. Okay? I made a mistake. An accident is an accident. No one intentionally, like if you see cars crashing and that wasn't intentional, then that's an accident. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, when we're talking about an accident. If he intentionally did what happened, okay, it was a mistake. You got to man up, take responsibility for those mistakes. Hey, but we'll get into. I'll get into this in another video.